Well, good afternoon to you. It's 3:07 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, 3:30, Make America Healthy Again. Jay Richards of the Heritage Foundation reacting to RFK's excellent testimony today before the United States Senate as people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren go absolutely apoplectic, in defense of the pharma companies. That they are unbelievable shills. Unbelievable shills. What a great exchange today. We got a lot to get to there. Nate Hawkman will be with us at 4 o'clock as we talk about the Trump administration trying to stop all of these NGOs from taking your money and smuggling humans into the country. And Ryan Staley is with us from Parents Defending Education at 5 o'clock as President Trump moves to cut off funding for all of that racism and body negativity that the left has been pushing on the schools. No more of that. And thank God, we've got a lot to discuss. You can talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I wanted to start with RFK, but let me first start with something we've been long waiting for, which is the President of the United States just moments ago signed into law the Laken Riley Act. The Laken Riley Act finally being signed into law. It directs Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain illegals who have been arrested or charged with theft-related crimes or those who have been accused of assaulting a police officer. It also allows states to sue the Department of Homeland Security for any harm caused to their citizens because of illegal immigration. This is a huge, huge deal. This forces the federal government to do its job at the risk of lawsuits from states who say, you're not doing it. You're not protecting us. Wonderful. And additionally, it makes it so that the feds have to intervene and that people have to cooperate with the feds in order to get these dangerous illegals out of our country. So the Laken Riley Act finally coming to pass. It made its way through both the House and the Senate this month, now appearing before the president. It becomes the very first bill that President Trump signs into law. He signed a lot of executive orders and actions over the course of the last week. Now he's signed a piece of legislation, the Laken Riley Act. Here's the president today talking about all of it.
In our first week in office, we set records, taking over 350 executive actions. That's not been done before. And it has reportedly been the single most effective opening week of any presidency in history. And we want to keep it that way. We want to keep it going.
The president talking about a number of things, number of executive orders that he signed for the benefit of the country. But also importantly, as I mentioned, the whole point of this press conference today at the White House was to sign the Laken Riley Act.
We've gathered this afternoon to take another historic action. However, in a few moments, the Laken Riley Act will become the very first bill that I proudly sign into law as the 47th President of the United States.
Very proud to sign it. He gave some explanation of the killer here, a guy called Jose Ibarra, how he got into the country illegally, and that he is a member of a vicious Venezuelan gang.
The vicious criminal who murdered Precious Laken was an illegal alien member of the barbaric Venezuelan prison gang known as Tren de Aragua. He trespassed across our southern border in 2022 and was apprehended by Border Patrol, but under the cruel policies of the last administration, instead of being deported, as he should have been, he was released into the United States, as were millions of other people, many of them very dangerous people. And you see what we're doing. We're getting them the hell out of here.
Yeah. And on President Trump's point, Jose Ibarra entered the country in September of 2022. And then he was arrested in August and he was released by the Biden administration, this despite his gang affiliation. And then in August of 2023, he was arrested by the New York City Police Department for posing a threat to a child. And then he was released by New York without ICE being able to detain him. And then he was flown at federally funded taxpayer expense to Georgia, where he would then go on to kill Laken Riley. This story is as atrocious as you can possibly imagine.
He was soon arrested again in New York City on charges of endangering a child,
Yes.
but because of New York City's deadly sanctuary policies, as we have in California and many other places, which we're going to end them, he was released again to reoffend. The Biden administration then provided this illegal alien criminal with a free, taxpayer-funded flight
Sorry, I got a little ahead of the president. I didn't realize he'd give you this much detail.
from New York to Georgia, where he was arrested yet again, constantly, this time for stealing from a Walmart along with his gang member brother, who was a bad one. Only after being released a third time by the U.S. law enforcement did this cold-blooded criminal go out in that fateful morning hunting for women on whom to prey. That's what he did. He hunted. It was like a hunter. And we're going to show him who the hunter is. This horrific atrocity should never have been allowed to happen. And as president, I'm fighting every single day to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. We don't want this to happen.
Laken Riley's family on hand today for the signing of that legislation. Laken Riley's mother, Allyson Philips, spoke to the nation.
Our family will forever be grateful for the prayers of the people across our nation and for helping to get this legislation into law. We also want to thank President Trump for the promises he made to us. He said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken. And he hasn't. He's a man of his word. We trust that he will fight for the American people. Most importantly, I want to thank our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because without his sacrifices, Laken's story would have ended on that horrific day that she was taken from us. But because of him, we can continue living knowing that we will see Laken again. There's no amount of change that will ever bring back our precious Laken. Our hope moving forward is that her life saves lives. We're so thankful that her passion for helping others and her legacy for doing good in the name of Jesus Christ will carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also in attendance, Laken Riley's stepfather, John Phillips, who at the sentencing for Laken Riley's killer, Jose Ibarra, he read out a journal entry from her, and you heard from the mother just a moment ago. They're a family of faith, and Laken Riley, too, was a sincere and devout Christian. And in fact, she had written a diary entry, and we only learned about this at the sentencing, to her future husband and how she wanted to be a good Christian wife to him. Just want to play a little bit. This is from the sentencing, John Phillips.
I'm so proud of Laken and the beautiful person she was. And while I could stand here and try to tell the world the things that made her such a wonderful person, as well as the many things we have all been robbed and deprived of, I think one of her last journal entries dated 12/17/23 says it best. So here we go. To my future husband. As silly as I feel writing this, my old small group leader once recommended it, so here I am. To my future husband, I want you to know that I'm thinking about you. I'm working every day to become the best wife I can be. By working through my current relationships to best prepare me for ours and our kids one day. I'm focusing on God and what He defines as a faithful Christian life, and so that I can best embody those characteristics. I pray that you know that it is with my full faith and trust in God that I know this relationship has been handcrafted by Him. I pray that we continue to glorify the Lord, prioritize Him in every aspect of our lives, and raise our family, our future family, to be God-fearing Christians as well.
A good God-fearing Christian American woman robbed of all that potential, taken from this world by a vile criminal who should have never been here. And today, the culmination of the work of Laken Riley's family as President Trump signs that bill into law. President Trump, immediately upon signing the bill, handed that famous Trump signature marker to Laken's mother, Allyson Philips.
In honor of Laken Riley, come on up here, some of the people that we love that have been so instrumental. Okay? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, government funding. Can you take a quick question on government funding? Pause.
I don't think this is appropriate time, really. I respect that, but I don't think it's appropriate.
Yeah, a question somebody trying to put out about government funding, a little bit of a back and forth on the capacity for the Trump administration to freeze all of this discretionary spending that they've been attempting to do in the last 24 hours. The White House on that front, by the way, has been saying that they've merely rescinded the OMB memo about this, but it is not stopping their efforts to get control of our very out-of-control federal government right now. So, updates on that story ahead as well. But on this issue of getting control of our borders and all of the illegal foreign nationals who are within them, the president also had an additional announcement today, besides the signing of the Laken Riley Act into law. The president announced that he would be opening bed space at Guantanamo Bay. Take a listen to this. Here he is today to accommodate the worst of the worst, especially if we are concerned that their home countries may release them back to us again.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. This will double our capacity.
What do you think this is going to do for the likeliness that someone would dare make that journey into the United States? If you now know that Guantanamo is on the menu of the possible outcomes of your efforts to sneak into our country, you think that might be a deterrent?
Immediately, right? And tough. That's a tough place to get out of. Today's signings bring us one step closer to eradicating the scourge of migrant crime in our communities once and for all. And it was just it's just an unforced error that we even have to be doing this now.
Yeah, okay. So President Trump announcing that there's a 30,000-person migrant facility available to the federal government, to the Trump administration, to use at Guantanamo Bay. I just did some cursory research on the subject just to see, because I was wondering, how many detainees have we had at Guantanamo Max at any one time? And it really is in the vicinity of 700 to 800 people. It's not 30,000 in that traditional, I guess, terrorist detention facility. But the president saying there, most people don't even realize we've got a capacity of 30,000 for migrants at Guantanamo. Well, good. If we do, let's use it effectively. They've been talking for years about, let's shut it all down. Let's shut it down. Let's close the facility. But if we have a perfectly good way to protect the American people, let's do that. President Trump's announcing that today. He's signing that executive order, yet another deterrent for all of the criminality and sneaking in we've seen. 321. All right, let's go to the phones. I got Mike calling in from Fairfax County, line 2. Hello, Mike. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Hey, just wanted to clarify something. When he talked about the detention camps in Guantanamo Bay having 800, you're focusing only on the terrorism aspect.
Right.
So the migration detention camps were created in 91. So Bush put in about 12,500, and Clinton himself had over 50,000 migrant Haitians put there. So that's the reason it was created. It was for the illegal immigrants. In this case, it was the migrant kind of influx into the country when they had all types of unrest in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So this has been done before.
Yeah, and I assumed when I was describing that, I assumed that they were two separate facilities. So you've confirmed that for me. I wasn't sure. So that's fascinating. And so, in other words, we've got room for tens of thousands of people, and President Trump is tapping into a resource that's at his disposal.
Well, not only that, he's tapping into a resource that Clinton used in '94.
Yes, yeah, for both Cubans and Haitians, I'm told. So we're housed there, 50,000 people. Being held there. And so President Trump is saying he wants to open up 30,000 beds for the worst of the worst, especially for countries who he doesn't trust to keep these violent criminals from coming back. So that's the whole point, is to deter this type of violent, illegal migration into the United States. And I think that could have that effect, Mike.
Yeah, I just didn't want the listeners to get confused between that and the place where he put like KSM and the other terrorists.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Mike Gitmo, yeah. So President Trump announcing today it's open for business for violent illegals. A nice addition to the package of options we have to deal with this. Hey, coming up, I got to talk about RFK Jr. What an amazing Senate hearing today. RFK, if you watch it, open eyes, open ears, open brain, RFK comes away looking great. He looked great today. Meanwhile, you have United States senators who are owned by the food industry or owned by the pharmaceutical companies sitting up there talking about, I love the audacity, up there like saying, well, we just want to make sure you don't have any conflict of interest. Whoa, wait a second, Senator. Let's talk about conflicts of interest. Elizabeth Warren literally tried to get RFK not to sue pharmaceutical companies anymore. She wanted him to make a pledge that he wouldn't do it. She's so corrupt. It's all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, good afternoon. 3:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Nate Hochman joins us at 4 o'clock. We talk about these organizations that have been taking your money and trafficking foreign nationals into our country. President Trump putting a stop to that. Nate talking about the impact of all of this. And then at 5 o'clock, Ryan Staley from Parents Defending Education as President Trump banishes bigotry and body negativity from the schools. Long overdue. A big victory for parents everywhere. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The president's cabinet is coming together. Sean Duffy has just been sworn in as the transportation secretary. A massive improvement over Pete Buttigieg. And today in the United States Senate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was subjected to some of the dumbest possible questioning you can imagine from the Democrats. And I think he did a pretty good job. RFK very quickly in today's hearing laying out the stakes, what's going on in America.
Americans' overall health is in grievous condition. Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s. Cancer among young people is rising by 1 or 2% a year. Autoimmune diseases, neurodevelopmental disorders, Alzheimer's, asthma, ADHD, depression, addiction, and a host of other physical and mental health conditions are all on the rise, some of them exponentially. The United States has worse health than any other developed nation, yet we spend more on health care, at least double, and in some cases triple, as other countries.
Not a single person in that room had a clearer vision of what's going on with American health than RFK did, making him the right guy for this job. I have a lot of audio to share with you today. I won't be able to get to all of it right away, but let me just get to Elizabeth Warren first, because I think that really stands out to me. Senator Elizabeth Warren tried to get RFK Jr. to commit to never suing the pharma companies again. After you leave office, including while you're in office, you promise that you won't sue these pharmaceutical companies. And RFK called her out on it. RFK, he cornered her on this.
You financially down the line.
I'll comply with all the ethical guidelines.
That's not the question. You and I, you have said
You're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Look, no one should be fooled here. As Secretary of HHS, Robert Kennedy will have the power to undercut vaccines and vaccine manufacturing across our country.
Oh, and she doesn't want him suing the pharma companies. She went out into the hallway afterwards to double down on this point.
His answers are he intends to continue to make money off his anti-vax position. Look, he says he won't go to work for drug companies because the American people have a right to know that the decisions made while he is Secretary of HHS are only for the good of the American people. And yet, he wants to keep a piece of the action on every one of these anti-vax lawsuits. And what that means potentially is, as Secretary of HHS, he can make those lawsuits a whole lot more profitable. In fact, he may have the opportunity to bankrupt the vaccine manufacturers, and then nobody gets vaccinated.
This is where I'm here to tell you that you know how much money she's made from the medical industry and those pharmaceutical companies? Oh, only $5.2 million in contributions. Congresswoman Nancy Mace sharing that today. In case you're looking for the underlying motivations for why she would be so protective of the pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, 5.2 million reasons. Here to discuss all of it, Jay Richards joins us now, director of the Heritage Foundation's DeVos Center for Life, Family, and Religion. Jay, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks so much, Vince. Good to be with you.
An amazing day. How do you think RFK Jr. did in the Senate?
I think he did really, really well. I mean, honestly, a colleague that watches these things told me just a minute ago, he said, well, it was RFK's to lose, and he absolutely didn't lose it. He vindicated himself well. He had a lot of really good sound bites. He wasn't mean-spirited, I don't think. I mean, that interaction with Elizabeth Warren was a little heated, but she was asking absurd questions, as you noted, and I think that came across. He was extremely knowledgeable in his detail. I'd love to compare, the hearing of Becerras 4 years ago, the previous HHS secretary, and see the kinds of softballs he probably had to deal with.
Yes.
They were asking RFK Jr., do you know exactly how many children, like newborn children, are on Medicaid, right? It's like, really? I mean, you expected the head of HHS to have that level of granularity, but anyone that watched the whole hearing is saying, okay, this guy knows a lot about this stuff, and he's been willing to take social and political risks, even personal risks, for the sake of the truth. And I really hope that the committee, at least the rational ones on the committee, see that.
Yes, and there's nothing shallow about RFK Jr. What came out in today's testimony was that he has a depth of knowledge that is unusual among human beings. I mean, the guy is encyclopedic. He was quoting in detail various pieces of data from so many studies through the years. And he did have answers to many of the questions that these senators put to him about how many people are served by these programs. He could answer down to the person in many cases, and that's something that most nominees are not capable of.
That's right. And that was surprising me that some of these questions, like, total numbers on Medicaid, for instance, he knew a lot of details about Medicare and Medicaid. We're talking each one of these is massive kind of European government size entities unto themselves, and they're all under HHS. In my view, I want to say, okay, who passed the test of the COVID lockdowns and the vaccine mandates? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was one of those people. Ron DeSantis was one of those people. They passed the most crucial test of the last decade. And so I just really hope that people see what an opportunity this is, that a man like Donald Trump and RFK Jr. could ally on something.
So, Jay, one of the things that I think distinguishes RFK Jr., one of the many things, is the fact that he seems to have his eye completely on the ball when it comes to American health. Because his thing is, we've got a huge chronic disease problem. Obesity rates are unseen anywhere else on the planet. That's not the way it is anywhere else. We spend the most money on healthcare, and we get some of the poorest results out of that. And so, in other words, our system dramatically needs to be fixed. And in Washington, all of the debates are always about spending levels and who pays and how can we get more money for this? What new program can we create? And meanwhile, RFK is saying, no. Let's start with the basics. How do we make Americans healthy, and what is causing their lack of health?
Absolutely. I mean, the childhood chronic disease epidemic is precisely the right focus. And if you sort of tie this back, in almost every case, it has something to do with a weird legal cartel between big pharma, sometimes big food, and the federal regulatory agencies. It's a weird incestuous relationship that's hard to analyze on the left-right axis, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr. understands that. And it's really the first opportunity I think we've had in a century to actually be able to reform some of these things.
Yeah, that's for sure. Did you get the feeling like you could sort of tell who was owned by these industries during the course of the questioning today?
You certainly could. I mean, of course, like some people wish that he had gone right back to Elizabeth Warren and accused her and pointed out how much she's gotten from these companies. But the social media algorithms and the people online did it for us. Within 10 seconds, X had screenshots of how much money Elizabeth Warren has gotten from Big Pharma. It should be obvious to everyone that whatever you think of RFK Jr.'s views, he is in this because he believes in it. He believes he's helping people, and he was willing to honestly alienate a lot of his family in order to do the things that he's doing. That's a sign of authenticity from where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and also, one of the biggest recipients of pharmaceutical cash in terms of political donations is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, who sits up there and acts as if, that any rich company is his enemy, not if they're giving him a lot of cash. And you heard it today. It's like all these senators, they reflexively defend the products that come from all of these companies and suggest that they deserve no scrutiny whatsoever. As RFK has to keep saying this until he's blue in the face, he is not opposed to vaccines. He is for being honest about whether or not they have side effects. That's a very reasonable position to take.
It is. And people like, Senator Wyden, it's like they're living in a different decade. They don't know what's happened since 2020. They don't know what parents that are 25 years old that just had a baby and the doctor tells them they need to get this hepatitis B vax on day one, even though we've tested the mom and she's negative. That's what they're dealing with. And so this idea that you have to be sort of reflexively, I support anything called the vaccine, no matter what it is, that's absurd. And pointing these things out doesn't make you sort of abstractly anti-vaccine, which is what they've tried to tar him with all this time.
Yeah. Also, he seemed to be one of the only people that was sitting there who was willing to talk about whether what's going on with American food, what's going on with the groundwater, what's going on with soil. These are not fringe or crackpot issues. These are very serious and real issues, aren't they, Jay?
They absolutely are, and some of that is probably more the jurisdiction of the USDA than HHS. But if you want to know where those USDA food guidelines came from, they came from HHS-funded studies that once they got the sort of six-country study that supposedly showed animal fats, cause heart attacks, they just shut down the research on alternative hypotheses. This happens again and again and again. And he didn't fall into the trap I think they were trying to get him to fall into by, sort of claiming he was going to have authority over the USDA. But the reality is the advice the USDA gives on food guidelines ultimately comes from the science that's done in places like the NIH, which is under HHS.
That's right. And he talked about the way those scientists will be able to do their jobs when he becomes the HHS secretary. He emphasized today that he is going to allow them to do the science unmolested by the sort of big outside influences that typically capture these agencies. He wants to get rid of all of that agency capture and allow authentic science to play out. That would be a huge breath of fresh air.
And absolutely amazing. And he said, as a lawyer that's been suing these companies, he understands corporate capture better than almost anyone. He had a front row seat on this. He gets it exactly. And those of us that are in Washington, D.C. dealing in policy, we see it all the time. But the problem is that both the Republicans and the Democrats managed, I think, to get defanged because the left doesn't want to criticize government and the right doesn't want to criticize businesses. But look, conservatives are about competition and free markets. We're not about corporations capturing regulatory agencies and vice versa. That's what we're dealing with.
That's exactly right. Yeah, no, this is not, standing up for a crony capitalism where a company owns the regulatory body and generates revenue off of that. That's not a free market. That's a rigged market, Jay Richards.
Exactly. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's what I think people need to understand. And honestly, going to conferences about this stuff in the last couple of years, there are millions of Americans across the political spectrum, Catholic homeschool moms, sort of anarchists, people off the grid in Oregon, but they come together around this set of issues and it needs a political voice. And I think it finally has one.
So I not only think that he's good, that he'd be good at it. And in other words, I think he's at least clears the bar of being a fine candidate. I actually think, having seen all of this and what I'm watching now, I think that it is hard to imagine someone who would be better in this role. Am I crazy, Jay?
There is absolutely no one. I really thought, okay, Trump will probably make him sort of health czar in the White House. He won't go for the gusto. But as we've seen this first week of the Trump second administration, he goes for it in every case. And honestly, I suspect that if some lone Republican in the Senate decides to vote against RFK Jr., that's Trump's nominee, I suspect Trump will make it his business to make it hard for those people. There really isn't a second candidate for this. He's the guy for this job. He's the generalist. He's the one that'll be managing the giant operation, and then he will appoint experts and scientists, people like Jay Bhattacharya at NIH, that know the details that will be able to execute this vision.
And he's going to be joined by, hopefully, Marty Makary, Dr. Marty Makary, who will run the Food and Drug Administration. And once again, I'm here wondering, how could we have a better team? Because these guys have genuinely different views about what the government should be up to. They genuinely care about these missions. And they're the kind of you kind of mentioned it before, Jay, is like the guys who got COVID right, the guys who handled that entire thing right. Marty Makary is in there.
He is. And Jay Bhattacharya, who was one of the co-authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, early on came out in the fall of 2020. And Jay himself actually has changed his minds on the benefits of the mRNA vaccine. He was an initial enthusiast, but based on data, he thinks, okay, there's a lot of people, it's probably a bad idea to have this. He is just the kind of person that you would want. He's open to evidence.
Yes.
He's an MD. He's also an economist. It's just the perfect person to run the NIH.
And they have respect for the voters, and they treat them like the adults they are. So that's it. Those are all great qualities. Hey, Jay Richards, thank you very, very much over at the Heritage Foundation. Great to talk to you today, sir. Yeah, a lot of wild moments today at that hearing with RFK Jr., including Bernie Sanders displaying pictures of baby onesies behind him that RFK had literally nothing to do with, and then asking RFK, are you supportive of these onesies?
They are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unvaxxed, Unafraid. Next one, and they're sold for $26 a piece, by the way. Next one is No Vax, No Problem. Now, you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for
His former organization, Children's Health Defense.
$6, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines. Can you tell us now?
By the way, if these onesies are about COVID jabs, the COVID jab is not helpful to an infant, and an infant should not get a COVID jab. That's insane to do, just to be crystal clear.
That you will, now that you are pro-vaccine, that you're going to have your organization take these products off the market.
Senator, I have no power over that organization. I'm not part of it. I resigned from the board.
Yeah, that was just a few months ago. You founded that. You certainly have power. You can make that call. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with leadership.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
Militant onesies.
I am supportive of vaccines. I will. I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that product. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
These onesies are very, very dangerous. These are militant onesies. These are assault onesies, says Bernie Sanders today, who, by the way, once again, one of the biggest recipients of pharmaceutical company cash in terms of campaign contributions. He is a phony. He's a complete phony sitting up there. I'm very angry about these onesies. These onesies are putting a real damper on all my campaign contributions. These onesies. Are you? You can't be serious. He said it with his whole chest.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
This is a big moment for him. Are you supportive of these onesies? Coming up, Nate Hochman, very supportive of onesies. The guy loves onesies. He'll join us. He'll talk to us about all these non-governmental organizations who've been taking your cash and trafficking foreign nationals into the country. The Trump administration announcing this week, that's over. Nate Hochman reacts.